The diplomatic station orbited the neutral moon of Kepler, 442c, a gleaming structure of crystalline metal that had hosted peace negotiations for over 3 centuries. As a Zeltharian observer, I had witnessed countless species reach agreements within those halls. My 4 eyes had seen warriors lay down plasma rifles, watched ancient enemies share communion drinks, and observed the signing of treaties that ended wars spanning millennia. Nothing had prepared me for the humans. They arrived in a single ship, unremarkable by galactic standards, roughly the size of a Korvac frigate, but lacking the ornate decorations that most species use to display their power. The human vessel was purely functional, gray metal scarred by micrometeorite impacts and engine burns. Ambassador Sarah Chun stepped through the airlock with only 2 advisors, while the Corvanthi delegation had brought 47 representatives, each more intimidating than the last. The Corvanthi Empire controlled 12 star systems and commanded a fleet that had conquered worlds before humans had even discovered fire. Their representative, War Chief Thaxon, stood nearly 3 meters tall, his exoskeleton gleaming with battle honors. Razor-sharp mandibles clicked as he spoke, a sound that had struck fear into a dozen species. The terms are simple. Thaxon's translator device converted his chittering into standard galactic. Humanity will surrender the Terra system and all colonial holdings. Your species will be relocated to designated agricultural worlds where you will serve the Empire's food production needs. Refuse, and we will reduce your home planet to molten slag. Ambassador Chun sat quietly at the negotiation table, her small frame dwarfed by the massive Corvanthi delegation. She had been taking notes on an archaic paper pad throughout their demands. When Thaxon finished speaking, the chamber fell silent except for the gentle hum of the station's life support systems. "I need to ask you something," Chin said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you know what happened to the last species that tried to invade Earth?" Thaxon's mandibles clicked in what I recognized as Corvanthi laughter. "Your species has never faced invasion. Our intelligence is quite thorough." "You're right," Chin nodded. "No alien species has ever successfully invaded Earth. But others have tried to conquer us." She turned a page in her notebook. In 1939, a group of humans calling themselves the Third Reich controlled most of Europe. They had advanced technology, disciplined armies, and absolute certainty in their superiority. They believed they were destined to rule the world. What relevance does this primitive history have? Thaxon's translator conveyed his irritation. "They made the same mistake you're making now," Chin continued. "They underestimated us. Within 6 years, their empire was ashes. Their capital cities were burning ruins. Their leader died in a bunker, forgotten and defeated. I noticed that Chin's human advisors had gone very still. Their faces showed an expression I couldn't interpret, something between sadness and cold fury. These were conflicts between your own species." Thaxon waved a clawed appendage dismissively. "Primitive warfare with chemical explosives and projectile weapons. Our fleet could sterilize your world from orbit." "Could you?" Chin asked. "Your intelligence reports show Earth's population as 8 billion humans across one planet. What they don't show is what we've become." She stood up, her movements deliberate. "We are no longer confined to one world, War Chief. We're not even confined to one star system anymore." The chamber's lights dimmed slightly as Chin activated a holographic display. It showed the local star sector, dozens of systems within 50 light-years of Earth. Red dots began appearing throughout the display, hundreds of them, then thousands. "Each dot represents a human settlement," Chin explained. "Colony worlds, asteroid mining stations, deep space habitats, research outposts. In the past 2 centuries, we've spread across 43 star systems. We've built cities in the vacuum of space and underwater on ocean worlds. We've learned to survive in environments that would kill most species within minutes." Thaxon leaned forward, his compound eyes reflecting the holographic display. "Impossible. Our scouts have detected no large-scale human presence beyond your original system." "Of course not. We learned something from our own history. Never put all your population in one place where an enemy can destroy it. Chen's smile was sharp. Every colony is self-sufficient. Every station has its own manufacturing capability. Every settlement can build weapons, ships, and more colonies. I felt my tertiary heart skip as the implications became clear. The Corvanthy Empire operated on traditional conquest models. Capture the homeworld, control the government, subjugate the species. But if humans had spread across dozens of systems with no central authority, you're claiming your species practices autonomous colonization. I interjected, unable to contain my scientific curiosity. That's theoretically impossible. No species can maintain technological civilization without centralized resource management. We don't manage resources centrally, Chen replied. We compete for them. Every human colony, every station, every settlement operates as an independent entity. They trade, they cooperate, they sometimes fight each other. It's chaotic, inefficient, and absolutely unstoppable. The display zoomed in on a single star system, showing orbital platforms, asteroid mines, and 3 inhabited worlds. This is the Centauri Reach. 16 million humans living on worlds that used to be barren rock. They've built fusion reactors from local materials, grown forests in artificial biomes, and established trade routes with 4 other colonies. Parlor tricks, Thaxton snorted. Our advanced fleet will do exactly what? Chen interrupted. Destroy Centauri Reach? Congratulations, you've eliminated 0.5% of human civilization. The other 42 systems will analyze your attack patterns, reverse engineer your technology, and improve their defenses. She advanced the display again. This time it showed a barren asteroid field. This was the Morrison Belt 3 years ago. Empty space and floating rocks. Today, it houses 12 million humans in habitats they carved from the asteroids themselves. They've built shipyards, research facilities, and universities, all from materials they mined from what looked like worthless debris. I watched Thaxton's posture change subtly. The confident intimidation display was fading, replaced by something that looked almost like concern. Your threats assume we're still the species your scouts observed 2 centuries ago, Chen continued. But we've changed. We've adapted. Every challenge we've faced has made us stronger, more resilient, more dangerous. The Empire has conquered dozens of species, Thaxton said, but his voice had lost some of its earlier certainty. Our fleets are unmatched. I'm sure they are. Against conventional species with conventional civilizations. Chen closed her notebook. Tell me, War Chief, what happens to your empire if it takes you 50 years to hunt down every human settlement? What happens when your ships are constantly under attack from enemies who can build new fleets faster than you can destroy them? What happens when your own colonies start wondering why they're following leaders who started an unwinnable war? The chamber fell silent again. I realized I was witnessing something unprecedented, a species that had prepared for war not by building bigger ships or stronger shields, but by becoming impossible to completely destroy. We'll discuss your proposal, Thaxton said finally. No, Chen said quietly. You'll withdraw your fleets from human space. You'll formally recognize our territorial claims. And you'll do it within 72 hours. Or what? Chen's smile was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen on any sentient being's face. Or you'll discover what 43 star systems full of angry humans are capable of when someone threatens our families. As the Corvanthy delegation filed out of the chamber, I remained seated, trying to process what I had witnessed. I had come here expecting to observe another routine territorial negotiation. Instead, I had watched a species casually reveal that they had transformed themselves into something that couldn't be conquered by traditional means. The humans had become something new, a distributed civilization that could survive anything short of galactic extinction. And from Ambassador Chen's demeanor, I suspected they were only getting started. The Corvanthy Empire's response came exactly 71 hours and 37 minutes after Ambassador Chen's ultimatum. War Chief Faxon contacted the diplomatic station with a message that would have been laughable if it weren't so ominous. The Empire does not bow to threats from primitive species. Our war fleet will arrive in the Sol system within 10 standard days. Prepare for total subjugation. I watched Ambassador Chen receive the message with the same calm expression she had maintained throughout the negotiations. Her two advisors exchanged glances, and I noticed one of them, an elderly human named Colonel Martinez, shake his head sadly. They chose poorly, Martinez murmured. Chen activated her communication array and sent a brief message on what appeared to be an old-fashioned radio frequency. The transmission lasted exactly 30 seconds and consisted entirely of number sequences. To most observers, it would have seemed like random data. "What did you just broadcast?" I asked, my scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic protocol. "It coordinates sequence and authentication code," Chen replied matter-of-factly. "I've just informed every human settlement in 43 star systems that we are at war." "That's impossible," I protested. "Radio signals can't reach other star systems faster than light. Your message will take years to arrive at the nearest colonies." Colonel Martinez smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both grandfatherly and predatory. "Ambassador, should we explain quantum entanglement communication to our friend?" "No need to reveal all our secrets," Chen said. "But Dr. HFY should understand that we've had instantaneous communication across interstellar distances for nearly 50 years. Every human settlement has been aware of this negotiation since it began." My four eyes widened as the implication struck me. "You've been coordinating with your entire civilization throughout these talks." "Coordinating is too strong a word," Chen corrected. "We've been consulting. Each colony makes its own decisions, but they like to stay informed about galactic events that might affect them." 3 hours after Chen's transmission, something extraordinary happened. The deep space monitoring arrays that watched the neutral zone began detecting ships. Not one or two vessels, but hundreds. They appeared from seemingly empty space, dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and began forming into formations. I rushed to the observation deck, where the station's external cameras provided a spectacular view of the gathering fleet. Human ships of every conceivable design were materializing throughout the system. Some were sleek military vessels that looked purpose-built for combat. Others appeared to be converted cargo haulers with weapon systems welded to their hulls. A few were so strange I couldn't immediately determine their function. "Magnificent, isn't it?" Chen had joined me at the viewing portal. 43 different star systems, 43 different approaches to ship design. No standardization, no unified command structure, no central planning. "This is militarily insane," I breathed. "How do you coordinate tactics? How do you prevent friendly fire incidents? How do you even communicate between ships with different technical standards?" "We don't, mostly." Colonel Martinez had arrived as well. "Each group fights its own way, uses its own strategies, follows its own leaders. It's chaos. But it's creative chaos," Chen added. "Watch." As I observed, the disparate human ships began moving into what could generously be called a formation. But unlike any military deployment I had ever studied, this one seemed to organize itself around principles I couldn't identify. Ships clustered by size, by apparent function, by technological style, but also by patterns that made no immediate sense. "The colony ships from New Geneva specialize in electronic warfare," Chen explained, pointing to a group of vessels bristling with antenna arrays. "They're positioning themselves to provide sensor coverage for the combat units." The mining consortiums from the asteroid belt brought ships designed for moving massive objects. They'll serve as heavy weapons platforms. The agricultural worlds sent their transport fleet, Martinez continued. Those ships are designed to carry millions of tons of cargo across interstellar distances. Today, they're carrying kinetic projectiles. I felt my secondary circulatory system struggle to process what I was seeing. "You're describing a military force assembled from civilian infrastructure." "Exactly. Every human settlement has capabilities that can be adapted for warfare. We've never needed a dedicated military because our entire civilization can become a military when necessary. A communication signal chimed through the station. The message was brief and came from the lead Corvanthi vessel. Human fleet will disperse immediately or face destruction. You are outgunned and outnumbered. Chen activated the station's response system. War Chief Faxon, this is Ambassador Chen. I'm forwarding tactical data on the human fleet currently assembled in this system. I strongly recommend you review it before taking any hostile action. The data package she transmitted made my scientific training rebel against accepting what I was seeing. According to the sensor readings, there were now over 3,000 human vessels in the system. More were arriving every few minutes. This cannot be accurate, I stammered. Your entire species doesn't have the industrial capacity to build so many ships. You're thinking like a centralized civilization again, Martinez said patiently. In the old days, Earth's nations built warships in massive government shipyards. It was expensive, time-consuming, and limited by available resources. We changed the paradigm, Chen added. Every human settlement builds ships constantly. Cargo vessels, passenger transports, mining platforms, research ships, personal craft. When we need a war fleet, we simply repurpose what we've already built. She gestured toward the growing formation. That cargo hauler from the Vega colonies? Its main hold is now filled with missile launchers. The passenger liner from New Osaka? It's been converted into a troop transport. The research vessel from the Darwin expedition? Its scientific sensors have been reprogrammed for targeting. The beautiful part, Martinez continued, is that we can do this conversion faster than most species can deploy their standing fleets. While the Corvanthi were organizing their invasion force, every human settlement was quietly modifying their existing ships for combat. I watched through the viewing portal as another group of human vessels appeared. These were clearly more recent arrivals. Their hull configurations were unlike anything else in the growing fleet. The frontier colonies, Chen explained, noticing my confusion. They're 15 light years from here, but they've been working on something special since we started these negotiations. Special how? They've been stripping raw materials from an entire asteroid field and converting it into weapons platforms. Nothing fancy, just masses of metal accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. Colonel Martinez checked his chronometer. They should be arriving right about. The sensor displays lit up as hundreds of new contacts appeared at the edge of the system. Unlike ships, these were simple projectiles, chunks of asteroid material that had been accelerated across interstellar distances. They carried no crews, no life support, no sophisticated systems, just mass and velocity. Kinetic bombardment on an interstellar scale, I whispered. The frontier colonies have been experimenting with it for years, Chen said. They call it asteroid mail. It's a cheap way to send materials between star systems, but it also makes an excellent weapon delivery system. The Corvanthi fleet had finally arrived during our conversation. 200 ships, each one a masterpiece of military engineering. Sleek, predatory designs with weapons systems that could crack planetary crusts. Against any conventional fleet, they would have been overwhelming. Against what the humans had assembled, they looked almost quaint. War Chief Faxon, Chen broadcast. Your fleet is impressive. 200 ships, state-of-the-art weapons, disciplined crews. Under normal circumstances, you would be unstoppable. Then, surrender now. Faxon's response crackled with confidence. Your civilian vessels are no match for military ships. You're right, Chen agreed. In a fair fight, ship to ship, your forces would dominate. But we don't fight fair. She activated a new display that showed the tactical situation from the Corvanthi perspective. The human fleet wasn't arranged in any formation that matched military doctrine. Instead, they had spread throughout the system in what looked like random positions. Every human ship out there has been built by a different colony, using different technologies, following different design philosophies, Chen explained. Your tactical computers can't predict their behavior because there is no standard behavior to predict. Furthermore, Martinez added, Every ship captain out there is making independent decisions. No central command, no unified strategy. Some of them will probably retreat at the first sign of trouble. Others will fight until their ships are completely destroyed. Most will do something unexpected that your war computers haven't been programmed to handle. This is not military doctrine, I protested. This is organized chaos. Exactly, Chen smiled. And chaos is very difficult to defeat with conventional tactics. The first shots were fired by a Corvanthi destroyer that targeted what appeared to be an isolated human cargo vessel. The plasma beams struck the target dead center, and for a moment it seemed like the engagement would follow predictable patterns. Then, the cargo vessel exploded. The explosion was far larger than any ship that size should have been capable of producing. The blast wave expanded outward, carrying debris and radiation that immediately disrupted sensors throughout the area. Antimatter warhead, Martinez explained casually. The Centauri Mining Consortium has been experimenting with antimatter containment. That particular ship was carrying about 10 kilograms of the stuff. You used a civilian vessel as a suicide bomber, I said, horrified. No, Chinkedictive. Captain Rodriguez used her ship as a suicide bomber. Her choice, her tactics, her sacrifice. That's how we fight, every person making their own decisions about how to contribute to the overall effort. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The Corvanthi fleet attempted to execute standard military maneuvers, while the human forces responded with tactics that seemed to follow no pattern whatsoever. Ships appeared and disappeared using stealth technology that shouldn't have existed on civilian vessels. Others launched attacks from vectors that defied conventional understanding of space combat. How? I asked, watching a human agricultural transport somehow disable a Corvanthi cruiser with what appeared to be modified farming equipment. Innovation born of necessity, Chen replied. When you build everything yourself from local materials, you learn to improvise. When you can't rely on central authority for support, you learn to solve problems creatively. By the end of the engagement, which lasted less than 6 hours, the Corvanthi fleet was in full retreat. They had lost 67 ships to enemy action and another 34 to what their reports would probably classify as unknown phenomena. The human fleet had lost over 400 vessels. A Pyrrhic victory? I asked. Not even close, Martinez laughed. Those 400 ships will be replaced within a month. Every human colony is already building new vessels to replace their losses. By the time the Corvanthi regroup and return, we'll have twice as many ships as we started with. Chun was composing a message to the retreating Corvanthi fleet. War Chief Thaxon, you fought bravely and with honor. Your tactical skills are impressive. Unfortunately, you made the same mistake that many have made throughout human history. You tried to defeat us by destroying our military. She paused, then added, we don't have a military. We have a civilization that can become a military when necessary. There's a significant difference. As I watched the human fleet disperse back to their home systems, I realized that I had witnessed something that would reshape galactic politics. The humans had demonstrated that distributed civilization. Princess Zeratil of the Vexnari Empire stood on the crystalline balcony of her tower, watching the crimson sunset paint the 3 moons of her homeworld. Her translucent blue skin shimmered with bioluminescent patterns that betrayed her inner turmoil. Today marked the beginning of the selection trials, where suitors from across the galaxy would compete for her hand in marriage and the right to rule alongside her. The Vexnari were an ancient and proud species, their empire spanning 14 star systems. For millennia, they had maintained their dominance through careful breeding programs and strategic alliances. Royal marriages were never about love, but about strengthening bloodlines and expanding territorial control. Zaratil had known this her entire life, accepting it as her duty to her people. Her personal aide, Miran, approached with cautious steps. Your Highness, the final contestant roster has arrived. Representatives from the Corvan Federation, the Thackeray Dominion, and there's an unusual entry. Zaratiel's antenna-like appendages twitched with curiosity. Unusual how? A human, Your Highness. From a small planet called Earth. The species isn't even recognized by the Galactic Council as a major civilization. The princess turned, her large violet eyes reflecting surprise. Humans were known to most galactic species as primitive newcomers who had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. They possessed no great fleets, no vast territories, no advanced technology that could rival the established powers. Why would a human enter the trials? She wondered aloud. Miran consulted her holographic tablet. His name is Marcus Chun. According to his registration, he's a former military officer from Earth Space Force. His reason for entering simply states, to prove that worth isn't measured by the size of one's empire. Zaratiel found herself intrigued despite her better judgment. She had met many suitors over the years, each one calculating and ambitious, viewing her as a prize to be won rather than a person to be known. The idea that someone would enter without obvious political gain was fascinating. The trials would begin tomorrow with the test of wisdom, where contestants would solve complex political scenarios. This would be followed by the test of strength, the test of honor, and, finally, the test of heart. Few made it past the second trial, and none had ever completed all 4 tests without her father's explicit approval. That evening, Zaratiel attended the welcoming feast for the contestants. The great hall buzzed with diplomatic conversations and barely concealed schemes. She observed from her elevated platform as various dignitaries presented their champions. Prince Zektar of the Corvin Federation stood 7 feet tall, his exoskeleton gleaming with ceremonial armor. He commanded a fleet of 1,000 ships and ruled over 6 mining worlds. When introduced, he boasted about his military conquests and the resources he could bring to the Vexnari Empire. Lord Vashtek of the Thrakkery Dominion was equally impressive, his reptilian features marked with scars of honor. His psionic abilities were legendary, and his family controlled the most profitable trade routes in the Outer Rim. He spoke eloquently about expanding the Empire's psychic research programs. Then came Marcus Chun. The human was unremarkable by galactic standards. He stood only 6 feet tall, with dark hair and kind brown eyes. His formal attire was simple compared to the elaborate garments of the other contestants. When he was announced, the hall fell into a confused murmur. Zaratiel's father, Emperor Zalmoth, leaned forward with obvious skepticism. Human, what do you offer the Vexnari Empire? What fleets do you command? What worlds do you rule? Marcus stepped forward without hesitation. Your Imperial Majesty, I offer something different. I offer the promise that your daughter will be valued not for her political connections, but for who she is as a person. I offer loyalty that comes from choice, not obligation. And I offer the perspective of someone who believes that true strength comes from protecting what you love, not conquering what you desire. The hall erupted in derisive laughter. Several contestants exchanged amused glances, clearly viewing the human as entertainment rather than competition. But Zaratiel found herself studying Marcus more carefully. There was something in his posture, a quiet confidence that didn't come from arrogance, but from conviction. When their eyes met across the great hall, she felt a strange flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with political calculation. Emperor Zalmoth's expression hardened. Pretty words from someone who brings nothing tangible to this union. You will need more than sentiment to survive the trials, human. Marcus nodded respectfully. Understand, Your Majesty. I ask only for the chance to prove that what I bring has value, even if it can't be measured in ships or territories. As the evening progressed, Zaratiel noticed how Marcus interacted with others. While the other contestants networked and schemed, he spent time talking with the servants, asking about their lives with genuine interest. When a young page accidentally spilled wine near his table, the other contestants either ignored the incident or showed mild annoyance. Marcus immediately helped clean up and made sure the page wasn't in trouble. These small acts of kindness didn't go unnoticed by the princess. In her world of political machinations, and calculated gestures. Such genuine compassion was rare. Later that night, unable to sleep, Zaratil found herself walking through the palace gardens. To her surprise, she discovered Marcus sitting by the fountain, studying what appeared to be historical texts about Vexnari culture. Most contestants spend their time before the trials strategizing or resting, she observed, announcing her presence. Marcus looked up and immediately stood, offering a respectful bow. Your Highness, I was trying to better understand your people's history and values. I realized I have much to learn. The other contestants believe they already know everything they need to win, she said, moving closer. You're different. Different doesn't always mean better, Marcus replied with a self-deprecating smile. I'm aware that I'm at a significant disadvantage, but I've never backed down from a challenge when I believed in the cause. And what cause do you believe in here? Zaratil asked, genuinely curious. Marcus was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. I believe that every person deserves to be loved for who they are, not what they represent. I believe that true partnerships are built on mutual respect and understanding, not political convenience. And I believe that someone is remarkable, as you shouldn't have to settle for a marriage that treats you as a commodity. Zaratil felt her bioluminescent patterns pulse involuntarily, a sign of emotional response she quickly tried to suppress. No one had ever spoken to her this way before. You don't know me, she said, though without hostility. How can you make such claims? You're right. I don't know you well yet, Marcus admitted. But I've seen how you treat others when you think no one is watching. I've noticed how your patterns dim when the political discussions get particularly calculating. I see someone who cares deeply about her people, but feels trapped by the expectations placed on her. I could be wrong, but I like the chance to learn who you really are beyond the crown and title. The princess stared at him for a long moment. In her entire life, no one had ever taken the time to simply observe her as a person. The fact that this human had noticed details about her that those who had known her for years missed was both touching and unsettling. The trials begin tomorrow, she said softly. They're designed to eliminate those deemed unworthy. Then, I'll have to prove that worth can't always be measured by traditional standards, Marcus replied, though I suspect your father won't make it easy for an outsider. Zaratil almost smiled at that. My father has very specific ideas about what makes a suitable match. You'll be facing more than just the trials themselves. I understand, but sometimes the most important things are worth fighting for, even when the odds are against you. As she returned to her chambers that night, Princess Zaratil found herself thinking about the human's words. For the first time in her life, she began to wonder what it might be like to be chosen not for political advantage, but simply for being herself. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Tomorrow, the trials would begin, and she would discover whether Marcus Chen's conviction was strong enough to overcome the considerable forces arrayed against him. The test of wisdom took place in the Great Council Chamber, where the three contestants faced a panel of Vexnari advisors and scholars. Each would be presented with a series of complex scenarios involving diplomatic crises, resource allocation, and military strategy. Prince Zektar went first, his exoskeleton clicking as he moved to the center of the chamber. The scenario presented to him involved a trade dispute between two vassal worlds that threatened to escalate into open conflict. His solution was swift and brutal: deploy the Imperial fleet to both worlds and impose martial law until order was restored. Effective, noted Elder Mordek, the chief advisor, but costly in terms of resources and potentially damaging to long-term loyalty. Lord Vashtek approached the challenge differently. Presented with a scenario involving food shortages on an outer rim planet, he suggested using his psychic abilities to identify the most efficient citizens and relocate the surplus population to labor colonies. Logical redistribution of resources, he explained with cold precision. The advisors murmured approvingly at his practical approach, though Zaratil noticed the clinical detachment with which he discussed relocating families as if they were inventory items. Then came Marcus's turn. The scenario presented to him was particularly challenging. A newly discovered world rich in rare minerals was claimed by 3 different species, each with legitimate historical connections to the planet. Military intervention would be costly, and any decision would create enemies. Marcus studied the holographic display for several minutes while the room waited in uncomfortable silence. The other contestants exchanged confident glances, clearly expecting the primitive human to embarrass himself. "I need more information," Marcus finally said. Elder Mordek frowned. "What additional information? What do the people currently living on this planet want?" The scenario mentions the historical claims of 3 species, but doesn't address the current inhabitants. "That is irrelevant to the strategic decision," the elder replied with obvious irritation. "I disagree," Marcus said respectfully. "The most sustainable solution would involve the consent of those most affected. I would propose a joint survey mission with representatives from all 3 claimant species, along with advocates for the current population. Let them establish a joint mining operation with shared profits based on a combination of historical claim strength and current population investment in the world's development." The room fell silent. It was a solution none of the advisors had considered, focused as they were on traditional power projection methods. And if they refused to cooperate, challenged another elder. "Then you offer mediation services through the Vexnari Empire, positioning yourselves as honest brokers rather than conquerors. You build relationships instead of taking resources by force. In the long term, willing partners are more valuable than subjugated enemies." Prince Zektar scoffed. "Idealistic nonsense. Power respects only strength." "Perhaps," Marcus replied calmly. "But I found that people fight harder against oppression than they do to defend willing partnerships. The empire that rules through consent rather than fear tends to last longer and face fewer rebellions." Elder Mordek conferred quietly with the other advisors. Zaratiel could see they were intrigued by Marcus's approach, even if it challenged their traditional thinking. The second scenario involved a plague outbreak on a colony world. The standard protocol would be to quarantine the planet and write off the population to prevent spread. Zektar recommended immediate quarantine with orbital bombardment, if necessary, to prevent contamination. Vashtek suggested evacuating only the most valuable citizens and letting the plague burn out naturally among the remainder. Marcus again requested additional information. "What resources does Earth have for dealing with biological threats?" "Earth?" Elder Mordek seemed confused by the question. "Humans have experience with pandemics. We've developed protocols for containment while preserving life. I would recommend a joint task force between Vexnari medical facilities and human epidemic response teams. We could probably save 90% of the population while containing the outbreak." "You would risk Vexnari lives for alien colonists?" asked another advisor. "I would risk some lives to save many more," Marcus replied. "But more importantly, imagine the loyalty such an action would inspire across the Empire. When other worlds face crises, they would know the Vexnari don't abandon their people. The political value of that reputation would be immense." By the end of the session, Marcus had provided solutions that prioritize preservation of life and building of relationships over displays of raw power. His approaches were unconventional, but demonstrated deep strategic thinking. As the contestants were dismissed, Zaratiel overheard her father speaking with the advisors. "The human solutions are interesting," Elder Mordek admitted reluctantly. "Unorthodox, but they show genuine strategic merit." "They show weakness," Emperor Zolmoth replied firmly. "Concern for inferior species is not a quality I want in a son-in-law." "Perhaps, Your Majesty, but his approach might actually strengthen the Empire's position in the long term. Fear-based rule has limitations." The Emperor's expression darkened. "Make sure the next trial eliminates this human. I will not have my daughter married to someone who coddles the weak." Zaratiel felt a chill run through her. She had been impressed by Marcus's wisdom and compassion seeing them as strengths rather than weaknesses. The realization that her father viewed these qualities as flaws created a conflict she had never experienced before. That evening, she sought out Marcus again, finding him in the palace training facility. Unlike the other contestants who were resting or politicking, he was practicing combat forms with a simple staff. "Preparing for tomorrow's trial of strength?" she asked. Marcus paused his routine and turned to her. "Trying to. I'm at a significant disadvantage physically compared to the other contestants." It was true. Prince Zektar's exoskeleton made him incredibly strong and durable. Lord Vashtek possessed psychic abilities that could enhance his physical capabilities. Marcus was just a baseline human. "Why continue?" Zaratiel asked. "After today's trial, you've proven your intelligence. No one would think less of you for withdrawing." Marcus set down his practice staff and faced her directly. "Because some things are worth fighting for, even when you know you'll probably lose." "And what are you fighting for exactly?" "The right to prove that worth isn't determined by species or power level. The chance to show that love and respect matter more than political calculation." He paused, then added quietly, "And the possibility that someone as extraordinary as you might choose to be with someone who sees you as a person rather than a prize." Zaratiel felt her bioluminescent patterns pulse again. "You still barely know me. I know that you question the system, even when it would be easier to accept it. I know that you care about fairness and justice. I know that behind all the royal protocol, there's someone who wants to be valued for who she is rather than what she represents." Marcus stepped closer. "And I know that you're here talking to me instead of accepting the easier path of choosing one of the other contestants. My father expects me to choose someone who can strengthen the Empire. Your father wants you to choose someone who confirms his existing beliefs about strength and power. But maybe the Empire needs a different kind of strength. Maybe it needs someone who builds alliances instead of demanding submission." Zaratiel was quiet for a long moment. "The trial of strength tomorrow isn't just about physical combat. There will be multiple challenges designed to test different aspects of power and capability." "I understand. My father has specifically requested modifications to the traditional format. I think he means to ensure your elimination." Marcus nodded grimly. "I figure as much. But I've been in hopeless situations before. Sometimes the key to surviving isn't being the strongest, but being the most determined." As she left the training facility, Zaratiel found herself hoping that Marcus's determination would be enough. For the first time in her life, she was genuinely invested in the outcome of the trials, not for political reasons, but for deeply personal ones. The next morning would bring challenges designed to eliminate the human contestant once and for all. But it would also bring something else. The first real test of whether Princess Zaratiel was willing to fight for what her heart wanted, rather than simply accepting what tradition demanded. The third day brought an unexpected development. Instead of meeting in the princess's chambers, Marcus was escorted to what his guides called the Memory Gardens. He had read about this place in his research, but never imagined he would be allowed to see it. The Memory Gardens were said to be where Zephyrians stored their most precious experiences, crystallized moments that could be shared and relived. The space defied description in any human language. Vast chambers filled with floating crystal formations, each one pulsing with captured memories. Some were as small as flowers, containing brief moments of joy or discovery. Others were massive structures that housed entire lifetimes of experience. The air itself seemed alive with whispered echoes of the past. Princess Lyralii was waiting for him at the center of the gardens, surrounded by a constellation of small memory crystals that orbited around her like planets around a star. She wore no formal regalia today, appearing more like an ordinary Zephyrian than the imperial princess he had first met. "Welcome to our most sacred space," she said as Marcus approached. "No alien has ever been permitted here before." Marcus felt the weight of the honor and the risk. "Why am I here, Lyralii?" The use of her name without title felt natural now, after their conversations of the previous days. "Because I want to show you something that may help you understand why this war began and why ending it is more complicated than either of us initially believed. She gestured to the memory crystals around them. These are my personal memories, gathered over 2 millennia of existence. One of the larger crystals drifted closer to Marcus, its surface showing swirling patterns of light that seemed to suggest shapes and movement. "May I touch it?" he asked. "If you wish to experience the memory it contains, yes. But be warned, human senses were not designed to process Zephyrian memories. The experience may be overwhelming." Marcus reached out carefully and placed his palm against the crystal surface. Immediately, the world around him dissolved. He was suddenly seeing through Lyraliai's eyes, but centuries in the past. A younger version of her stood on the bridge of a Zephyrian warship, watching as another fleet approached. But these weren't human ships. They were elegant, organic-looking vessels that seemed to be grown rather than built. The ethereals, Lyraliai's voice seemed to come from inside the memory. They were the last species we encountered before humanity. Beautiful, graceful, and completely dedicated to artistic expression. Their entire civilization was built around the creation of beauty. In the memory, Marcus watched as the ethereal fleet took formation. There was no aggression in their movements, only elegant precision that looked more like a dance than a military maneuver. They were trying to communicate through their positioning, creating patterns of extraordinary beauty even in the face of war. "We gave them the same choice we gave humanity," Lyraliai continued. "Submit to the Empire or face destruction. They chose to create one final artwork instead." The memory showed the ethereal ships beginning to glow, their hulls becoming translucent as energy flowed through them like blood through veins. They were transforming themselves into something magnificent and terrible, turning their entire fleet into a single, massive sculpture of light and motion. "It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen," Lyraliai said softly. "And I ordered their destruction anyway, because beauty was not strategically useful to the Empire." Marcus felt the memory version of Lyraliai give the order, felt her complete certainty that she was making the correct decision. The ethereal fleet vanished in brilliant flashes of light, their final artwork lasting only moments before it was erased forever. The memory faded, leaving Marcus back in the present, shaken by what he had experienced. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I need you to understand that this war isn't just about territorial disputes or resources. It's about a pattern that has repeated for centuries. Each time we encounter a new species, we evaluate them based on their potential contribution to the Empire's power and efficiency. Each time, we find them wanting. Each time, we destroy them." Marcus felt a chill of understanding. "And you're questioning that pattern for the first time?" "Because of you, yes. You've made me realize that perhaps we've been asking the wrong questions. Instead of asking what each species can contribute to our empire, perhaps we should be asking what the galaxy loses when they disappear." Lyraliai moved to another memory crystal, this one smaller and more recent. "This is from our first conversation. Would you like to experience it from my perspective?" Marcus nodded, reaching for the crystal. This time, the transition was gentler, but the experience was no less profound. He felt Lyraliai's initial dismissiveness transform into curiosity as they spoke. More than that, he felt her loneliness, the crushing weight of millennia spent making decisions that affected entire civilizations while having no one who truly understood the burden. When the memory ended, Marcus found Lyraliai watching him intently. "What did you experience?" she asked. "Isolation," Marcus said quietly. "Absolute isolation despite being surrounded by an entire empire. You've been making life and death decisions for entire species while having no one to share the weight of those choices." "No one could understand," Lyraliai said. "My advisors see only strategic possibilities. My subjects see only their princess and military leader. For centuries, I have been alone with the knowledge of what our expansion truly costs." Marcus stepped closer to her, moved by the pain he had felt in her memory. "You don't have to be alone with it anymore." "Don't I?" "You are human," Marcus Chen, even if we end this war, even if humanity survives, you will live perhaps a century while I continue for millennia. How can any connection between us be more than a brief moment in my existence? It was a question Marcus had been avoiding, but now it demanded an answer. The connection he felt to Lyralii was unlike anything he had experienced, but she was right about the fundamental differences between them. How could anything meaningful develop between beings with such different lifespans and natures? Maybe that's exactly why it matters, Marcus said finally. You've lived for centuries, but when did you last feel truly surprised by another being? When did you last discover something about yourself that you didn't know existed? Lyralii was quiet for a long moment, her galaxy eyes reflecting the light of the memory crystals around them. 2 days ago, she admitted, when I first spoke with you. Then, perhaps the brevity isn't a flaw, but a feature. Perhaps the knowledge that our time is limited makes every moment more precious, not less. You're suggesting that the temporary nature of our connection is what gives it meaning. I'm suggesting that meaning doesn't require permanence. A single, perfect moment can be worth more than centuries of routine existence. Lyralii moved closer to him, close enough that he could feel the energy radiating from her crystalline form. Marcus Chun, I find myself facing a choice I never anticipated. I can end this war, spare your species, and never see you again. Or I can propose something that has never been done in the history of the Zephyrian Empire. A true alliance, not a subjugation. A partnership between species that could last as long as we both exist. Marcus felt his heart stop. The implications were staggering, not just for the war, but for everything that might follow. What would such an alliance require? Trust, understanding, and perhaps something more personal to bind our species together. Lyralii's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Marcus Chun, I find myself wanting to ask you a question that may shock us both. I'm listening. In 3 days of conversation, you have shown me aspects of existence I had forgotten were possible. You have reminded me what it feels like to be curious about another being, to be surprised by connection, to value something beyond strategic utility. She paused, seeming to gather courage. Do you desire me as your wife, human? The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. Marriage between their species seemed impossible on every level, biological, cultural, practical. Yet as he looked into her galaxy eyes, he realized that the impossibility wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the courage to reach for something beyond what either of them had imagined possible. More than life itself, he answered, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. The memory crystals around them suddenly flared with brilliant light, as if responding to the emotional intensity of the moment. Lyralii stepped back, her crystalline features showing something that might have been wonder. Then, we face a new challenge, she said softly. How to build a future that neither of our species has ever imagined. Marcus reached for her hand, no longer caring about the impossibility of their situation. The same way humans have always faced impossible challenges. One day at a time, with hope and stubbornness and the absolute refusal to accept that something can't be done just because it's never been done before. You would truly bind yourself to me, despite the differences between us, despite the fact that I have been responsible for the deaths of millions. I would bind myself to the being who had the courage to question those deaths, to the person who chose curiosity over certainty, to Lyralii, not the princess, but the individual who wants to discover what she might become. For the first time since he had met her, Lyralii smiled without reservation. It transformed her alien features into something radiant and beautiful beyond description. Then, let us discover together what the galaxy might become when two impossible beings decide to love each other anyway. The announcement sent shockwaves through both the Zephyrian Empire and what remained of human space. Princess Lyralii, heir to the most powerful empire in the galaxy, was to marry Marcus Chun, a human diplomat. The marriage would formalize an unprecedented alliance between species, ending the 3-year war, and establishing new protocols for interspecies cooperation. The reactions were immediate and intense. Within hours of the announcement, Marcus found himself facing a hollow conference with Earth's Emergency Council, their faces displaying various combinations of disbelief, relief, and concern. "Marcus," Admiral Harrison began carefully, "we need to understand exactly what you've agreed to. Marriage to an alien princess? The implications are staggering. The implications are that humanity survives," Marcus replied calmly. "Lyralii isn't just offering marriage, she's offering true partnership. No subjugation, no second-class status. Equal standing in an alliance that could reshape how species interact throughout the galaxy." President Shun leaned forward on the screen. "But marriage, Marcus? Is this diplomacy or something more personal?" Marcus met her gaze steadily. "It's both. The personal connection made the political alliance possible. Without understanding each other as individuals, we could never have built trust between our species. And you truly believe you love this alien being?" The question was blunt, but Marcus had been asking himself the same thing since making his declaration. "I believe I love who she is when she's free to be herself rather than just a weapon of empire. I love her curiosity, her courage to question certainties she's held for centuries, her willingness to choose connection over isolation." Dr. Reeves, the xenobiologist, spoke up from the council. "Marcus, the biological implications alone are overwhelming. How would such a union even function? Humans and Zephyrians are as different as matter and energy." "We'll figure it out," Marcus said simply. "Humans have always been good at adapting to impossible situations." On the Zephyrian side, the reactions were even more dramatic. Marcus watched from Lyralii's chambers as she faced her own council, their crystalline forms flickering with agitation that was visible even to his human eyes. "Princess, this is beyond unprecedented," declared General Thaxon, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. "Marriage to an alien? The very concept violates 1,000 years of imperial protocol." "Then perhaps it's time for new protocols," Lyralii replied calmly. "The old ones have led us to endless cycles of conquest and destruction. This alliance offers something different." High Counselor Vera, an ancient Zephyrian whose energy patterns indicated extreme age, stepped forward. "You would bind yourself to a creature that will live perhaps 100 years while you endure for millennia? What happens when he dies and you remain?" It was the question that had haunted Marcus as well, but Lyralii's answer surprised him with its thoughtfulness. "Then I will carry his memory, his perspective, and his influence forward through those millennia. Instead of existing alone with the weight of imperial decisions, I will have experienced what it means to value each moment, each choice, each connection. That lesson will live beyond his physical existence. And if the alliance fails, if humanity proves unworthy of partnership," pressed General Thaxon, "then we will deal with that when it happens, rather than destroying them preemptively because of what they might become. We have made that mistake too many times before." Marcus watched Lyralii defend their decision with a passion that made his heart race. She wasn't just protecting their personal relationship. She was advocating for an entirely new philosophy of how powerful species should interact with weaker ones. After the council sessions ended, Marcus and Lyralii found themselves alone in her chambers, both somewhat drained by the intensity of the reactions their announcement had provoked. "Are you having second thoughts?" Lyralii asked, settling beside him on the crystalline seating area that had somehow adapted to accommodate human physiology. "About marrying you?" "Never," Marcus replied immediately. "About whether we can actually make this work." "Every few minutes." Lyralii laughed, the sound like crystal chimes in a gentle breeze. "At least you're honest about your doubts. I find myself oscillating between absolute certainty and complete terror." "What terrifies you most?" "That I might destroy you," she said quietly. "Not intentionally, but simply by being what I am. My energy patterns, my lifespan, my responsibilities to the Empire. Any of these could overwhelm what you're capable of handling as a human. Marcus took her hand, still marveling at the warm energy that flowed through her crystalline form. And what gives you certainty? The fact that in 3 days of conversation, you've changed me more than 2,000 years of existence ever did. If you can do that in 3 days, imagine what we might accomplish together over decades. Speaking of accomplishments, what exactly would this alliance look like? Beyond the marriage, I mean. How do we actually build partnership between species that are so fundamentally different? Lyralii stood and moved to the transparent wall that showed the view of space beyond. Earth was still visible in the distance, no longer under siege, but still scarred by years of war. I've been considering that question since we made our decision, she said. The Zephyrian Empire has conquered through superior technology and strategic thinking, but perhaps that very superiority has blinded us to what we lack, which is innovation born from necessity, creativity born from limitation, adaptation born from survival pressure. She turned back to face him. Humans excel at these things precisely because you've had to. You've faced challenges that would have destroyed most species, but you've found unexpected solutions. Marcus began to see the shape of what she was proposing. You want humans integrated into Zephyrian operations, not as subjects but as partners. Our different perspectives could complement your advanced capabilities. More than that, I want to establish joint colonies, mixed crews on exploration vessels, collaborative research stations. I want our species to learn from each other rather than one simply dominating the other. The logistics alone would be staggering. Our environmental needs, our communication methods, our social structures, they're all different, which is exactly why it would work, Lyralii said with growing excitement. Each challenge we solve together makes both species stronger. Each successful collaboration proves that difference is a source of strength rather than division. Marcus felt a surge of enthusiasm as he began to understand the scope of her vision. We wouldn't just be ending a war. We'd be creating a model for how any species could coexist. Precisely. And our marriage would be the symbol of that possibility. Not a political arrangement, but a genuine connection between beings who chose to see past their differences to find what they shared. Which brings us back to the practical question. Marcus said gently, how exactly does marriage work between a human and a Zephyrian? Lyralii moved closer to him, her galaxy eyes reflecting the ambient light of her chambers. I've been researching that question as well. While we cannot be physically intimate in ways your species might expect, there are other forms of connection available to us, such as energy resonance. Zephyrians can share our energy patterns with compatible beings. It would allow us to experience something analogous to what humans call emotional intimacy. And memory sharing, like what we did in the memory gardens? Yes, but deeper. True memory bonding, where we can share not just experiences, but the emotions and insights attached to them. Over time, we could build a shared consciousness that transcends our individual limitations. Marcus felt a thrill at the possibilities she described, but also a touch of apprehension. Would I still be human after such bonding? You would be human plus more, Lyralii said softly. Just as I would still be Zephyrian, but enhanced by your perspective and experiences. We would become something neither of us could be alone. A new kind of being altogether. Perhaps the first of our kind, but not the last. If we succeed, we could offer this possibility to others. Humans and Zephyrians who choose to bond across species lines. Marcus stood and moved to stand beside her at the viewing wall. Earth hung in space before them, a small blue world that had somehow produced beings capable of reaching across impossible differences to find connection. When do we begin? He asked. The ceremony is planned for 7 days from now. Both of our councils need time to prepare the formal alliance documents, and our peoples need time to process what this means. And in the meantime, Lyralii turned to face him fully, her expression showing vulnerability that he was beginning to recognize as uniquely hers. In the meantime, We learn whether two impossible beings can actually love each other enough to build something beautiful from their differences. Marcus reached for both her hands, feeling the energy flow between them like a promise of what they might become together. I think we've already started proving that's possible. Outside the viewport, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, witnesses to the birth of something the galaxy had never seen before, a love that bridged not just the space between worlds, but the space between entirely different ways of being lived. The wedding ceremony took place in the void between the human and Zephyrian fleets on a specially constructed platform that existed in the neutral space between worlds. Representatives from both species gathered in environmental suits or energy fields as appropriate, creating the most unusual wedding party in galactic history. Marcus stood at the altar wearing a modified diplomatic uniform embedded with Zephyrian energy crystals, allowing him to survive in the space environment while maintaining the symbolic connection to both cultures. Beside him, Lyralii had taken a form more radiant than he had ever seen, her crystalline body shot through with patterns of silver and gold that seemed to represent joy itself. Admiral Harrison served as Marcus's best man, her weathered face showing a mixture of pride and bewilderment at the circumstances. On Lyralii's side stood High Counselor Vera, who had surprised everyone by volunteering to perform the Zephyrian portion of the ceremony, despite her earlier objections. The service itself was unlike anything either species had ever witnessed. Human vows of commitment and love were interspersed with Zephyrian energy harmonics that created visible patterns of light in the vacuum around them. When Marcus spoke his vows, his words were translated not just into Zephyrian language, but into resonance patterns that Lyralii's people could feel as well as hear. I take you, Lyralii, not just as my wife, but as my partner in proving that connection transcends difference, Marcus said, his voice carrying across both fleets through quantum communication arrays. I promise to bring human curiosity to our bond, to never stop discovering who you are, and to help you remember that existence has value beyond function. Lyralii's response came in harmonics that made the surrounding space shimmer with aurora-like colors. I take you, Marcus Chun, as proof that love is the universe's answer to isolation. I promise to bring Zephyrian perspective to our bond, to show you wonders beyond human imagination, and to learn from you that brevity makes beauty more precious, not less. The exchange of energy that followed was visible to everyone present. Lyralii extended her consciousness toward Marcus, and he felt her essence merge with his own. For a moment that lasted eternity, they were truly one being, experiencing existence from both human and Zephyrian perspectives simultaneously. Marcus felt himself expand beyond the boundaries of his physical form, consciousness flowing into patterns of energy and light that defied human understanding. At the same time, he felt Lyralii experience the intensity and urgency of human emotion, the way mortality made every sensation sharp and immediate. When they separated back into individual beings, both were changed. Marcus could still feel echoes of Lyralii's energy patterns within his own mind, while her crystalline form now showed traces of warmth and immediacy that hadn't been there before. By the authority of both the Human Federation and the Zephyrian Empire, announced High Counselor Vera, I declare you bound not just to each other, but to the future you will build together. The cheers that followed came in frequencies across the entire spectrum, from human voices to Zephyrian energy harmonics that painted the vacuum around them in celebration. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Joint Research Station New Horizon, watching as human and Zephyrian crews worked together to construct what would become the first truly integrated interspecies facility. The site still amazed him daily. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Human adaptability and Zephyrian technology had combined to create something neither species could have built alone. Modular sections allowed for different environmental needs, while quantum communication networks enabled real-time collaboration despite the different speeds at which the species processed information. Still surprised by what we've accomplished? Lyralii asked, materializing beside him in the energy base form she used when moving through the station. Every single day, Marcus admitted. 6 months ago, our species were trying to destroy each other. Now we're building research stations together and planning joint exploration missions to the galactic core. The High Council approved the Andromeda expedition proposal yesterday. Lyralii reported with excitement that was now tinged with recognizably human enthusiasm. The first interspecies crew will launch next year. Marcus shook his head in wonder. From war to joint exploration of another galaxy. Sometimes I can barely believe we've come so far so quickly. Humans aren't the only species capable of surprises, Lyralii said with affection. Zephyrians, it turns out, are quite adaptable when given proper motivation. They stood together watching the construction crews, human figures in environmental suits working alongside energy beings who could shape matter with thought alone. The sight represented everything their bond had made possible. Marcus, Lyralii said quietly, I've been thinking about what High Counselor Vera asked during the negotiations. What happens when you age and die while I continue for millennia? It was a question they had both been avoiding, but Marcus had been considering it more frequently as their bond deepened. I've been thinking about that too, he admitted, and I think I have an answer. Oh, you remember what you told your council about carrying my memory and perspective forward through the centuries? Of course. What if it could be more than memory? Marcus turned to face her energy form directly. What if our bonding process could be used to preserve something essential about human consciousness within Zephyrian energy patterns? Lyralii's form flickered with sudden understanding. You're suggesting that when your physical body fails, your consciousness could be preserved within mine. Not just preserved, but active, contributing, still able to grow and change and discover. It would be a new form of existence, neither fully human nor Zephyrian, but something unprecedented. The research teams have been making progress on consciousness transfer, Lyralii said thoughtfully. If we could adapt their techniques to work with interspecies bonding, then death wouldn't be the end of our partnership, just a transformation of it. And more than that, it could offer the same possibility to other bonded pairs. Eventually, we might be able to preserve the essence of entire species within Zephyrian consciousness networks. Lyralii moved closer, her energy form taking on a more solid appearance as she focused her attention. You would truly want such an existence? To give up physical form entirely? To continue growing and discovering with you? To help preserve human perspective within the galaxy, even after our species might face extinction? Yes, without hesitation. Then we have a new project to add to our research agenda, Lyralii said with the kind of joy that now characterized most of their conversations. Though I suspect this one will be our most ambitious yet. Solving death seems like a reasonably human challenge. Marcus agreed with a grin. Impossible, ridiculous, and absolutely worth trying. They were interrupted by a communication alert. The station's AI announced, Princess Lyralii, Marcus Chun, you have an incoming priority message from the Galactic Council. They exchanged glances before accepting the transmission. A holographic figure appeared before them. Ambassador Kelton of the Syrian Republic, a species that had remained neutral during the Human-Zephyrian War. Princess Lyralii, Mr. Chun, the ambassador began formally. I bring greetings from the Galactic Council and a proposal that may interest you both. We're listening, Lyralii replied. Your successful alliance has not gone unnoticed by the other species of the galaxy. The Council has been observing the progress of your joint ventures with considerable interest. Marcus felt a flutter of apprehension. What kind of interest? The productive kind, I assure you. Several species have approached the Council requesting assistance in establishing similar cooperative relationships. The Andromedan Collective and the Crystalline Dominion have specifically asked if you might be willing to serve as mediators for first contact protocols. Lyralii and Marcus looked at each other, and Marcus could feel her excitement through their bond. "You're asking us to help other species learn to cooperate rather than compete," Marcus said. "Precisely. Your marriage and alliance have become symbols throughout the galaxy of what's possible when beings choose connection over conquest. The Council believes you could help prevent future conflicts by establishing new models for interspecies relations." "We would be honored to accept," Lyralii said immediately. "Excellent. The first mediation request comes from a rather challenging situation. Two species in the Vega system have been engaged in a territorial dispute for 50 years. Both sides have agreed to attempt mediation only because of your success with seemingly impossible reconciliation." After the ambassador signed off, Marcus and Lyralii stood together in comfortable silence, absorbing the implications of what they had just accepted. From ending one war to preventing dozens of others, Marcus mused. "I guess we really have started something significant. The beginning of a new age," Lyralii agreed, "where difference is celebrated rather than feared, where cooperation is the default rather than the exception." Marcus took her hand, still marveling at the warm energy that flowed between them. "Think we can actually pull it off? Transform how the entire galaxy thinks about interspecies relations?" Lyralii smiled, her crystalline features showing the warmth she had learned from their bond. "We're humans and Zephyrians who fell in love across impossible differences and ended a war that everyone thought was unwinnable. I think we can handle a few more impossible challenges." Outside the viewport, ships from dozens of species moved through space in peaceful cooperation, following trade routes and exploration missions that had been impossible just months before. The site represented not just the end of one conflict, but the beginning of entirely new possibilities for the galaxy. Besides, Marcus added with the kind of confidence that had served humanity well throughout their history, "Impossible just means no one has figured out how to do it yet." Together, they turned back toward the interior of the station, ready to begin preparing for challenges they couldn't yet imagine, secure in the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it as they had learned to face everything else, together with curiosity and hope and the absolute refusal to accept that something couldn't be done simply because it never had been. The galaxy stretched out before them, vast and full of wonders they had yet to discover, populated by species they had yet to meet and alliances they had yet to forge. And somewhere in that infinite expanse of possibility, the next impossible challenge was waiting for the touch of human stubbornness and Zephyrian wisdom working in perfect harmony. The future, like their love, was going to be an adventure unlike anything anyone had dared to imagine. The wedding ceremony took place in the void between the human and Zephyrian fleets on a specially constructed platform that existed in the neutral space between worlds. Representatives from both species gathered in environmental suits or energy fields as appropriate, creating the most unusual wedding party in galactic history. Marcus stood at the altar wearing a modified diplomatic uniform embedded with Zephyrian energy crystals, allowing him to survive in the space environment while maintaining the symbolic connection to both cultures. Beside him, Lyralii had taken a form more radiant than he had ever seen, her crystalline body shot through with patterns of silver and gold that seemed to represent joy itself. Admiral Harrison served as Marcus's best man, her weathered face showing a mixture of pride and bewilderment at the circumstances. On Lyralii's side stood High Counselor Vera, who had surprised everyone by volunteering to perform the Zephyrian portion of the ceremony despite her earlier objections. The service itself was unlike anything either species had ever witnessed. Human vows of commitment and love were interspersed with Zephyrian energy harmonics that created visible patterns of light in the vacuum around them. When Marcus spoke his vows, his words were translated not just into Zephyrian language, but into resonance patterns that Lyralii's people could feel as well as hear. "I take you, Lyralii, not just as my wife, but as my partner in proving that connection transcends difference," Marcus said his voice carrying across both fleets through quantum communication arrays. I promise to bring human curiosity to our bond, to never stop discovering who you are, and to help you remember that existence has value beyond function. Lyraliai's response came in harmonics that made the surrounding space shimmer with aurora-like colors. I take you, Marcus Chun, as proof that love is the universe's answer to isolation. I promise to bring Zephyrian perspective to our bond, to show you wonders beyond human imagination, and to learn from you that brevity makes beauty more precious, not less. The exchange of energy that followed was visible to everyone present. Lyraliai extended her consciousness toward Marcus, and he felt her essence merge with his own. For a moment that lasted eternity, they were truly one being, experiencing existence from both human and Zephyrian perspectives simultaneously. Marcus felt himself expand beyond the boundaries of his physical form, consciousness flowing into patterns of energy and light that defied human understanding. At the same time, he felt Lyraliai experience the intensity and urgency of human emotion, the way mortality made every sensation sharp and immediate. When they separated back into individual beings, both were changed. Marcus could still feel echoes of Lyraliai's energy patterns within his own mind, while her crystalline form now showed traces of warmth and immediacy that hadn't been there before. By the authority of both the Human Federation and the Zephyrian Empire, announced High Counselor Vera, I declare you bound not just to each other, but to the future you will build together. The cheers that followed came in frequencies across the entire spectrum, from human voices to Zephyrian energy harmonics that painted the vacuum around them in celebration. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Joint Research Station New Horizon, watching as human and Zephyrian crews worked together to construct what would become the first truly integrated interspecies facility. The site still amazed him daily. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Human adaptability and Zephyrian technology had combined to create something neither species could have built alone. Modular sections allowed for different environmental needs, while quantum communication networks enabled real-time collaboration despite the different speeds at which the species processed information. Still surprised by what we've accomplished? Lyraliai asked, materializing beside him in the energy-based form she used when moving through the station. Every single day, Marcus admitted, 6 months ago, our species were trying to destroy each other. Now we're building research stations together and planning joint exploration missions to the galactic core. The High Council approved the Andromeda expedition proposal yesterday. Lyraliai reported with excitement that was now tinged with recognizably human enthusiasm. The first interspecies crew will launch next year. Marcus shook his head in wonder. From war to joint exploration of another galaxy. Sometimes I can barely believe we've come so far so quickly. Humans aren't the only species capable of surprises, Lyraliai said with affection. Zephyrians, it turns out, are quite adaptable when given proper motivation. They stood together watching the construction crews, human figures in environmental suits working alongside energy beings who could shape matter with thought alone. The site represented everything their bond had made possible. Marcus, Lyraliai said quietly, I've been thinking about what High Counselor Vera asked during the negotiations. What happens when you age and die while I continue for millennia? It was a question they had both been avoiding, but Marcus had been considering it more frequently as their bond deepened. I've been thinking about that too, he admitted, and I think I have an answer. Oh, you remember what you told your council about carrying my memory and perspective forward through the centuries? Of course. What if it could be more than memory? Marcus turned to face her energy form directly. What if our bonding process could be used to preserve something essential about human consciousness within Zephyrian energy patterns? Lyraliai's form flickered with sudden understanding. You're suggesting that when your physical body fails, your consciousness could be preserved within mine. Not just preserved, but active. contributing, still able to grow and change and discover. It would be a new form of existence, neither fully human nor Zephyrian, but something unprecedented. The research teams have been making progress on consciousness transfer, Lyralii said thoughtfully. If we could adapt their techniques to work with interspecies bonding, then death wouldn't be the end of our partnership, just a transformation of it. And more than that, it could offer the same possibility to other bonded pairs. Eventually, we might be able to preserve the essence of entire species within Zephyrian consciousness networks. Lyralii moved closer, her energy form taking on a more solid appearance as she focused her attention. You would truly want such an existence? To give up physical form entirely? To continue growing and discovering with you? To help preserve human perspective within the galaxy, even after our species might face extinction? Yes, without hesitation. Then, we have a new project to add to our research agenda, Lyralii said with the kind of joy that now characterized most of their conversations. Though I suspect this one will be our most ambitious yet. Solving death seems like a reasonably human challenge. Marcus agreed with a grin. Impossible, ridiculous, and absolutely worth trying. They were interrupted by a communication alert. The station's AI announced, Princess Lyralii, Marcus Chun, you have an incoming priority message from the Galactic Council. They exchanged glances before accepting the transmission. A holographic figure appeared before them. Ambassador Kelton of the Syrian Republic, a species that had remained neutral during the Human-Zephyrian War. Princess Lyralii, Mr. Chun, the ambassador began formally. I bring greetings from the Galactic Council and a proposal that may interest you both. We're listening, Lyralii replied. Your successful alliance has not gone unnoticed by the other species of the galaxy. The Council has been observing the progress of your joint ventures with considerable interest. Marcus felt a flutter of apprehension. What kind of interest? The productive kind, I assure you. Several species have approached the Council requesting assistance in establishing similar cooperative relationships. The Andromedan Collective and the Crystalline Dominion have specifically asked if you might be willing to serve as mediators for first contact protocols. Lyralii and Marcus looked at each other, and Marcus could feel her excitement through their bond. You're asking us to help other species learn to cooperate rather than compete, Marcus said. Precisely. Your marriage and alliance have become symbols throughout the galaxy of what's possible when beings choose connection over conquest. The Council believes you could help prevent future conflicts by establishing new models for interspecies relations. We would be honored to accept, Lyralii said immediately. Excellent. The first mediation request comes from a rather challenging situation. Two species in the Vega system have been engaged in a territorial dispute for 50 years. Both sides have agreed to attempt mediation only because of your success with seemingly impossible reconciliation. After the ambassador signed off, Marcus and Lyralii stood together in comfortable silence, absorbing the implications of what they had just accepted. From ending one war to preventing dozens of others, Marcus mused. I guess we really have started something significant. The beginning of a new age, Lyralii agreed, where difference is celebrated rather than feared, where cooperation is the default rather than the exception. Marcus took her hand, still marveling at the warm energy that flowed between them. Think we can actually pull it off? Transform how the entire galaxy thinks about interspecies relations. Lyralii smiled, her crystalline features showing the warmth she had learned from their bond. We're humans and Zephyrians who fell in love across impossible differences and ended a war that everyone thought was unwinnable. I think we can handle a few more impossible challenges. Outside the viewport, ships from dozens of species move through space in peaceful cooperation, following trade routes and exploration missions that had been impossible just months before. The site represented not just the end of one conflict, but the beginning of entirely new possibilities for the galaxy. Besides, Marcus added with the kind of confidence that had served humanity well throughout their history. Impossible just means no one has figured out how to do it yet. Together, they turned back toward the interior of the station, ready to begin preparing for challenges they couldn't yet imagine, secure in the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it as they had learned to face everything else. Together, with curiosity and hope, and the absolute refusal to accept that something couldn't be done simply because it never had been. The galaxy stretched out before them, vast and full of wonders they had yet to discover, populated by species they had yet to meet and alliances they had yet to forge. And somewhere in that infinite expanse of possibility, the next impossible challenge was waiting for the touch of human stubbornness and Zephyrian wisdom working in perfect harmony. The future, like their love, was going to be an adventure unlike anything anyone had dared to imagine. Marcus Chun had always believed that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their weapons or technology, but in their stubborn refusal to give up when everything seemed hopeless. Standing on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Prometheus, watching the massive Zephyrian fleet through the view screen, he wondered if that strength would be enough today. The war had been raging for 3 years. What started as a territorial dispute over mining rights in the Kepler sector had escalated into something far worse. The Zephyrian Empire, with their superior technology and seemingly endless resources, had pushed human forces back to their core worlds. Earth itself was under siege, its orbital defenses holding by the thinnest of margins. Marcus wasn't a soldier. He was a xenobiologist turned reluctant diplomat, chosen for this mission because he understood alien psychology better than most. The brass thought maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to end this war without humanity being wiped from the galaxy. The Zephyrian flagship stellar Dominion loomed ahead, a crystalline behemoth that seemed to bend light around its hull. Their technology was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Marcus had studied their species for years, fascinated by their unique biology. Zephyrians were energy beings who had learned to inhabit crystalline forms, allowing them to interface directly with their technology. They lived for thousands of years and saw most other species as brief, inconsequential sparks. Incoming transmission from the Zephyrian flagship, reported Communications Officer Patel, her voice tight with nervousness. They're requesting you board their vessel immediately. Marcus straightened his diplomatic uniform and checked his translation device one last time. The small neural implant would allow him to communicate in perfect Zephyrian, though he wondered if perfect communication would be enough to bridge the gap between their species. "Tell them I'm on my way," he said, heading toward the shuttle bay. "And Patel, if this goes badly, make sure Earth knows we tried everything." The shuttle trip to the Zephyrian flagship felt like the longest 20 minutes of Marcus's life. The pilot, a young ensign named Torres, kept glancing nervously at the alien vessel growing larger in their view screen. "Sir," Torres whispered, "what if this is a trap? What if they just want to capture our top diplomat?" Marcus had considered the same possibility, but humanity was out of options. Their fleets were scattered, their worlds under constant bombardment, and their allies had either fallen or abandoned them. This meeting was their last chance at survival. "Then, we'll face whatever comes," Marcus replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "But remember, inside, humans have surprised aliens before. We might just do it again." The docking bay of the Zephyrian ship was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The walls seemed to pulse with inner light, and the air hummed with energy that made his skin tingle. Zephyrian guards, their crystalline bodies reflecting the ambient glow, escorted him through corridors that felt more like being inside a living organism than a spacecraft. The throne room was vast, its ceiling disappearing into shadows above. At its center sat a figure that took Marcus's breath away. Princess Lyralii of the Zephyrian Empire was beautiful in a way that defied human understanding. Her crystalline form was translucent blue-white, with veins of silver energy coursing through her body like liquid starlight. She was tall, elegant, and when she moved, it was with the fluid grace of water flowing uphill. But It was her eyes that captured Marcus completely. They were like twin galaxies, swirling with colors that had no names in any human language. When she looked at him, he felt as though she could see directly into his soul. "So," she said, her voice like music played on crystal chimes, "this is humanity's champion, the one they send to beg for mercy." Marcus straightened, drawing on reserves of courage he didn't know he possessed. "I come out to beg, Your Highness, but to seek understanding. This war serves neither of our peoples." Princess Lyralii laughed, a sound like silver bells in a winter wind. "Understanding? Your species has existed for barely a few thousand years. We have watched civilizations rise and fall for eons. What could you possibly understand about the greater galaxy?" "Perhaps nothing about the galaxy," Marcus admitted, "but I understand loss. I understand hope. I understand that even the mightiest empire can be wrong about the value of what seems small and insignificant." The princess leaned forward on her throne, studying him with those impossible eyes. "Interesting. Most species either grovel or threaten when facing extinction. You do neither, because neither would serve any purpose," Marcus replied. "Groveling won't change your mind about humanity's worth, and threats ring hollow when spoken by the losing side. But perhaps honest conversation might reveal something neither of us expected." For long moments, silence filled the throne room. The Zephyrian guards stood motionless, their energy forms flickering slightly as they maintained their positions. Princess Lyralii continued to study Marcus with an intensity that made him feel transparent. Finally, she spoke. "You intrigue me, human. In 3 years of war, no member of your species has spoken to me as an equal rather than a subject or enemy. Tell me, Marcus Chon of Earth, what makes humanity worthy of continued existence?" Marcus took a deep breath. This was the moment everything hinged on. The future of his entire species might depend on his next words. "We're not worthy of existence, Your Highness," he said quietly. "No species is worthy or unworthy. Existence isn't something to be earned or granted by others. It simply is. But if you're asking what makes us valuable, then I would say it's our capacity to surprise ourselves." The princess tilted her head, curious. "Explain." "Other species might call it foolishness, but we call it hope. When facing impossible odds, humans have a tendency to find impossible solutions. We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and our own technological adolescence. Each time, everyone expected us to fail. Each time, we found a way forward that no one, including ourselves, had imagined. And you believe you could surprise us as well." Marcus met her gaze steadily. "I believe we can surprise everyone, including ourselves. The question is whether you're curious enough to see what that surprise might be." Princess Lyralii stood from her throne, her crystalline form catching and refracting the ambient light into rainbow patterns on the walls. She descended the steps slowly, each footfall ringing like a struck bell. When she reached Marcus, she was close enough that he could see his reflection in her translucent features. "You speak of surprises and hope," she said softly, "but what of fear? Do you not fear death, Marcus Chin? Do you not fear for your species?" "Terror," Marcus admitted without hesitation. "I am absolutely terrified. But fear and hope aren't opposites. They're dance partners. Fear shows us what we might lose. Hope shows us what we might gain. Together, they give us the courage to reach for something better than what is." The princess studied him for another long moment, then did something that shocked everyone in the room, including herself. She smiled. It was a small expression, barely a curve of crystalline lips, but it transformed her entire face. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "there is more to humanity than our analysts believed." "Very well, Marcus Chun. You have earned something no other species has in 1,000 years. You have earned my curiosity. We will speak again tomorrow." As the guards escorted Marcus back to his shuttle, he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had just changed. He had expected to plead for humanity's survival. Instead, he had engaged in something far more dangerous and promising. He had begun a conversation.